So I have the Blackmagic Pyxis 6K for a little while, but I don't have a cage for it. So this is how I've built this whole rig without using a cage and still retaining most of the functionality of what I would do if I did have a cage. Now, at the base of the rig, we have the Pyxis 6K L mount. So I've got the Nisi PL to L mount adapter in there. Right now, I've just got a Nisi Athena 40mm. I was gonna leave the Blazer Remus 33mm on here, but I decided to shoot this video on it. And then on the front, we've just got the Tilta Mirage matte box. Honestly, I don't actually use this all that much. And if I did, it would mostly be for the VND that's in here. However, I generally prefer the Nisi Swift VND that I have. It doesn't make everything green like this one does. And then on the front here, I've also got the Tilta Nucleus Nano 2. So I've got the focus motor on the right side here, and then I've got the focus wheel on here. Now this is probably not how I would run it if I have first AC, obviously, because then they can be pulling focus. But how I have this attached is because it has that sort of NATO attachment on the back there, I've got this 15mm to NATO adapter here, so I've just got that straight on the rod, and then I can attach this or detach it whenever I want. And it's just really easy to then pull focus myself because I can just attach the focus wheel to the rig itself rather than changing it out for a fully manual one or pulling by hand. Honestly, pulling by hand's not that bad, but it is good to just be able to mount this easily. If this isn't being used at any point, like if I'm going to the shoot or something, I can just attach that and I know where it is. It's attached to the rig. On the right side here, we've got the Tilta Nucleus Nano 2 focus motor. I just have one. I have one on here for two reasons. One, I only have one. But two, I don't really need a motor for the iris because generally I'm not changing the iris at all throughout shots, so I can just set it manually. But I think one of the interesting parts about this, and I've talked about this in previous videos, this Condor Blue 8.5 inch right angle to straight USB-C cable. It's basically the perfect length, and having one right angle, one straight connector just makes this whole setup a lot easier. And I've got that plugged into the viewfinder port on the front of the camera. And that just means that I don't have to run a cable all the way back to power it from my V-mount battery or battery plate all the way back here. Now, as I talk about each part, I'm gonna take it off so you can sort of see it without. NATO to 15mm adapter there. And then I'm gonna unplug and remove this focus motor right here. Okay, now for monitoring, we have a few things. First of all, this camera has an SDI port, so we've got the port keys HS8, which is an 8-inch SDI and HDMI monitor. And one of the great things about it is it has this NPF dummy battery basically built into the back of it, so you can attach your transmitter straight onto the back. And I've just got the Holy Land Pyro S right on the back of there. And I basically just leave that on all the time because I'm almost always gonna be transmitting to my director's monitor over here, or if I'm not, then I'll just turn it off and I don't need that transmitter anywhere else. Now I've got those two devices connected with this 3G Condor Blue SDI cable, which is nice and short, although to be fair, because these ports are so close to each other, shorter would even be better. And then to connect the monitor itself to the camera, we've got a 12G, I think this is a 20-inch or 22-inch Condor Blue SDI cable, and that goes all the way along with the power cable that then goes into the DTAP port on the side of my V-mount plate, which I'll get to in a second. So to cable manage those cables, I've got a Mondo tie on the side of the handle right here, and I've only got the SDI cable going through that. I don't have the power one, which is because the power cable is just a little bit shorter. So I have that running down there, and then because of these mounting points on the top of the camera, I've just got another Mondo tie there to keep those cables together nice and neat and out of the way of the top handle. So I don't want to be grabbing the top handle and also grabbing a cable on there. That's not going to be great. And then finally, we have one more Mondo tie on top of the V-mount plate right here, just to organize those cables right to where they need to go at the end there before they plug into the camera or power. Now this handle is just the small rig, like light NATO handle, and I've just got that attached onto a NATO rail, and I'll explain that in a second. I really like this handle. Now it's not the sturdiest, so I was actually a little bit worried about how it was gonna perform with a rig this heavy, but it's been totally fine. I've never had any issues with any of my rigs using this handle. It's one of the most comfortable ones that I have ever used, and I just really like it as a top handle. And then to attach the monitor to that handle, we've got the small rig dual ball head, 3/8 inch at one end, 1/4 inch at the other end. Now the downside to nicely cable managing everything especially going through all these Mondo ties, is it makes it a little bit harder to de-rig. If I just want to take the monitor off, I've got to unhook all of these cables from all of these Mondo ties. But once I've done that, I can just loosen the nadir rail on the handle and slide the entire thing off. And then there's my monitor, transmitter, and handle. As you can see on the top here, we've got a 90mm small rig nadir rail and that Mondo tie. Links to both of these will be in the description. Actually, links to most of this stuff that I'm talking about will be in the description. But this was sort of the one thing that I needed to add to make this rig work without a cage. Because most cages will have a nadir rail on the front here, and I actually didn't have a long nadir rail. I actually had to buy this specifically for this camera, because all the nadir rails that I have are just like the short 50mm ones, and the screw holes on the top of this camera are way too far apart for a 50mm one. So I had to get a 90, and it fits pretty much perfectly. So that's nice. Now, as for handles, I've got these two rosette handles from Condor Blue. Now, these are the old ones. They do have updated ones that look a lot better, and I imagine work better as well. I would like to get those, but these ones still work pretty good. The one downside, and I have talked about this in a previous video, is the right handle here. I would like to have this handle further back, and that's when having that cage with the rosettes all over the place would make it a lot easier, because then I could just mount this handle back here but keep the one at the front, because having those two handles on opposite corners just sort of makes it a little bit easier to control. Whereas if you have both the handles at the front, then it can be a bit back heavy, and then it's just a little bit less controllable, let's say. But how I've sort of managed to work it is I always have my left one at the front tilted slightly forward, and then on this one I've just tilted this one back a little bit. These are the QR rosettes, so I can pretty easily adjust the angle of them. I just have it tilted back a bit, so then I can still have some difference between the handles, although it's not as much as I would like. And I've just got them attached on this Condor Blue dual rosette mount here that just goes onto 15mm rods. And this is pretty solid. Again, you can get these in like a whole kit, or you get the new versions of these in a whole kit, and that kit looks pretty good. I'll leave a link to the new version in the description, not these ones, because I don't think they sell these anymore. And then that leads me to power. To power the whole thing, I've got the SmallRig VB212. This is my favorite battery, and I want to get more of them, but you know, they're still pretty expensive. So I currently only have one, and I have a few VB99 Pros, which are on these cameras right now. But yes, SmallRig VB212, best battery that I've used. It's my favorite. I use it whenever I can. It is pretty big, yes, but on a rig this size, it's not out of place. I just don't have enough of them. And before I remove the battery, let's have a look at the Condor Blue V-Mount Pro. I've talked about this several times before. I love this V-Mount plate for a few reasons. One, it has this switch right here, so I can kill the power to everything, and I don't need to worry about removing battery or unplugging anything while things aren't meant to be on. I don't want to be draining batteries and stuff like that. So being able to turn everything off from one switch is really helpful. And then as you can see right here, we have reversible DTAP ports. The DTAP cable that I had for the monitor over here, that I had running through this monitor tie coming down. So then the cable itself was like coming up out of the port. But as you can see, this other DTAP cable here is actually pointing down because of those 3-pin DTAP ports. It allows you to put it anywhere you want. So let's get rid of the battery. And as you can see, the camera is still on, and that's because I have a BPU battery in there, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But otherwise, to power the camera itself from this V-mount plate, we've got this DTAP to 2-pin LEMO cable right here. I actually had to buy this specifically for this rig, again, because I don't have any other 2-pin LEMO devices, so I just had to buy a cable, and I actually really like this cable. This is from Alvin's Cables. I just got it on Amazon, and again, link in the description if you're interested. And I can't really explain it to you that well because you can't feel it, but it's very flexible, and it's sort of like got a rubbery sort of texture. I don't know, it's just nice. And it can also be sort of handy having different colored cables, so then you know which one's which. For example, all the cables that I have on here, my 2 SDI cables are blue, my power cable for my monitor is black, and then my power cable for the camera is red. Not a massive deal, but it's just really easy then to tell which is which when you're plugging in stuff and unplugging it. But back to the V-mount plate. With this rig, I actually only use the 2 D-tap ports. As I mentioned before, I plug my focus motor into the front viewfinder USB-C port, so I don't need to use one of the USB-C ports on the V-mount plate, although it does have 2, so if you need other things powered, you can plug it in that way. You can also power the V-mount plate with USB-C, so if you did want to hot swap batteries or something, you could plug like a 100-watt USB-C power into that, change the battery, and you should be fine. It shouldn't lose power at any point. Let's get rid of this V-mount Pro here, and again, it just attaches to 15mm rods, and that's it. Talked about it before, again, link in description. Now, as I mentioned, we've got a Sony BPU battery in here. This is the BPU 35, and the reason that I got a really small one is because I have no plans on powering it using only this. I entirely plan on using it with a V-mount battery, but I kind of like the idea of having a battery in the camera itself, so then if I do swap batteries or if it dies or something, the camera's not gonna die. It's kind of like a UPS sort of situation where if the V-mount dies, yes, my monitor will go off, but the camera won't. So if it's currently recording, it's not gonna like kill the recording or anything. It'll then give us time to, you know, stop the recording and then do whatever we need to do because it has that basically redundant power supply in there at all times. And like I said, because I don't have a cage, I kind of needed something to hold the whole rig together, and that is this base plate rod system. The way that I have this rig set up, there's only 2 mounting points of anything. There's the NATO rail for the monitor and everything that's attached to the monitor, then everything else goes off these rods because I basically can't attach anything else to the body because these screw holes here can be a bit limiting, and I talked about that as an issue that I had with this camera in my last video, so go check that if you haven't already. And then on the left side, there's nowhere to mount anything at all, so the top and bottom have plenty of mounting points, but the sides, not so much. So I had to mount everything on the top and the bottom, so NATO rail on top for the monitor and everything else, and then on the bottom, I just had this base plate with these 12-inch 15mm rods. I've had this sort of set up on my main rig, even with my FX30 for ages, and basically what it is it's 2 12-inch 15mm rods from Small Rig. They're carbon fiber, and they're in the Tilta dual base plate. Now, I've been using this dual base plate for so long, not only because it is really useful having both Arca Swiss and Manfrotto mounting points. Honestly, I very rarely use the Arca, but when I do, it's really nice to just be able to, you know, chuck a camera in there straight from the cage. Now, the Arca functionality won't come in handy at all for this camera because I've just got a Manfrotto plate on the bottom of that one. This is just the Small Rig plate that came with my Freeblazer 8100 tripod. It actually fits the length of the body quite well, as you can see. And then on the bottom of the base plate itself, we've got I think this is a 5-inch Small Rig Manfrotto plate, and I really like this one because it sort of just, not as much as a dovetail would, but it just sort of extends the base of the camera, so I can put it down on a table and it'll just sort of sit there. It also means that you can be a little bit more flexible when putting it into a Manfrotto tripod mount because you don't have to be quite as precise because it is a little bit longer. And then just for the sake of it, let's have a look at the sensor for a second. Let the light hit it real nice. But yeah, that's the Pyxis rig. While I put it back together, I'm just gonna go through what I kind of wish I could sort of do if I had some different stuff. And honestly, the first thing I mentioned at the start, cage. Putting the Condor Blue cage on here with the battery plate, little rod mounts, that would be super handy so that I don't need to run this whole base plate situation. Theoretically, you shouldn't even have to run a base plate at all. Could just put plate on the bottom of the camera and then that's it. It'll sort of shorten the whole rig so it's not as tall, which I think for the most part is a good thing. And honestly, that's pretty much all I would really want to change is, yeah, putting a cage on so then I can mount the handles and battery plate differently, get rid of the base plate entirely, and then it would just be sort of a more compact rig without being too compact, if that makes sense. It would basically lose like no functionality, but be more compact, at least height-wise. I think overall that would be a good thing. Now, if I didn't get a cage, one thing that I still could do is get the rosette plate or just another plate here, maybe a tilter or a condor blue one, and attach a handle another way. Having the rosette plate though that you can get for this, it has a rosette right here. That's a pretty good spot. And then maybe get like one of the smaller rig wooden rosette handles. I feel like that would be pretty good. What am I doing? Every time I put this power cable on, I forget how I did it last time. So we're just sort of winging it now. Probably one other thing that I would like to do would be replace this Portkeys HS8. Now I really like this monitor. It's not touchscreen though, which isn't a massive deal, but it can be a little bit annoying sometimes. And what I would like to do is replace it with a Holyland Pyro 7, which is a 7-inch monitor with a built-in transceiver. So then I just don't need to have the Pyro S on here. I can just transmit straight from the monitor to my director's monitor or to the Pyro S receiver. And then that would just sort of make this whole situation a little bit smaller and more succinct. Is succinct the right word for that? Probably not. Anyway, now another thing that I actually kind of like about the Pyxis compared to other cinema cameras, particularly like the Red Komodo X, which I've used before, that takes a while to turn on. This takes like 5 seconds. I was a little bit worried about it taking a while to turn on, which is part of the reason why I got the BPU battery. But honestly, I think I would be totally fine without it. And I almost was, because I bought the battery, it arrived after the camera, so I used the camera a little bit before even putting the battery in there, and I just had with the V-mount. And then also I didn't get a charger, and you can't charge these batteries in the camera, you have to charge them externally. That was another thing I talked about in a previous video. However, I have since bought a charger and I then charged this battery. So, oh yeah, probably one other thing that I would like to change would be on the mount here. I really want to get one of the Condor Blue Magic Arms and then put a monitor mount on that. So then I could still like pan and tilt the monitor without having to loosen anything. I've done that before with this mount using the monitor mount light from Small Rig. But the issue I had with that is the monitor mount light just isn't built for holding a monitor this size. So it just sort of couldn't really handle it, so I'd need a much stronger monitor mount. But overall, for what it is, I'm pretty happy with this rig, and I think this will work very well, obviously on sticks, but even handheld, I think it'll be totally fine. The one thing I haven't tried is to put it on a shoulder rig yet. That's actually something I should do, but I think it should be totally fine because I've put this rig just with a different camera in it on my shoulder rig and it worked just fine. And for storage, we have the ProGrade 1.6 terabyte Iridium CF Express Type B cards. I've got one of these, and I've got a 2 terabyte gold CF Express Type B card in here as well. ProGrade sent me these ones, so thank you to ProGrade for that. I also did buy a 1 terabyte one before I got these, so I have plenty of storage now for this, which is important because B-RAW isn't small files. So far, I've only shot in 12:1 compression, so it hasn't even been massive files yet. And we'll see if I can keep it that way, or maybe I'll need to up the compression a little bit. Down the compression, decrease the compression, anyway, you know what I mean. So that is my Blackmagic Pyxis 6K rig with no cage. Let me know your thoughts. If you have any other ideas of things that I could do without getting a cage, or if you have any questions about the rig or even just the camera itself, let me know if there's any other videos you would like to see on the Pyxis. Go watch one of my previous videos about this, do all the other things, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.